In Fallout lore, the Great War of 2077 wiped out global civilization, but despite the mass destruction caused by the nukes, humanity was like, nah, I'd win, and continued to forge on into the future. Some of these characters are even still alive hundreds of years after the war, and in this video, we're going to explore 10 characters we can meet in the Fallout games who survived the Great War and lived to tell about it. So buckle up, grab some iced coffee, and let's dive into the wasteland. Number 1. Eddie Winter. We meet this pre-war crime boss as part of Nick Valentine's personal quest, Long Time Coming. Winter is loosely based on the Winter Hill Gang, a real-life crime syndicate in 20th century Boston, which included people such as Whitey Bulger. Most of the pre-war characters we'll meet in this video survived as a result of turning into ghouls. In Fallout lore, massive radiation exposure can cause humans to live for hundreds of years cause video game logic. But one of the unique things about Winter is, unlike most of the other ghouls we encounter, he willingly underwent radiation treatment to ghoulify himself. Understanding the Great War was likely to break out, Winter underwent an experimental radiation treatment and then sealed himself up in a bunker underneath Andrew's station. And it's only when the sole survivor and Nick Valentine show up that Eddie Winter's chapter comes to a close. But unlike Nick Valentine, you won't have to decrypt a massive password to play today's sponsor, 1v1.lol. 1v1 is the fastest and most exciting battle royale with over 80 million players worldwide. You can play for free from anywhere on PC or mobile by clicking on my link in the description. And even if your brain's been fried like Billy the Ghoul, you can still enjoy 1v1 because of its adaptive difficulty through the rank-based matchmaking system. There are tons of different champions to choose from, each with their own unique abilities and playstyle. Quick is the starter champion, whose dash ability can close the distance or get you out of danger. Sky's leap ability allows you to rain down death from above. And Sentinel is a tank champion whose barrier shockwave absorbs damage and dishes it back to your enemies. There are lots of exciting game modes to dive into, and 1v1 always stays fresh with new challenges and rewards rotating daily. The gameplay also features a rich building experience, but be careful because the environments are destructible as well. 1v1 also brings you a collaboration with some of your favorite content creators like Slogo, Clicks, and Laserbeam to offer dope skins that you can earn for free, but hurry up. The skins are only available for a limited time until June 2nd. Participate in the Legends Clash tournament by winning matches with these skins for a chance to win 2,000 gems. It's time to start your journey in 1v1.lol. Click on the link in the description to download 1v1 and play for free today. Number 2. Mr. House, Fallout New Vegas. Robert House is the wealthy founder of Robco Industries, who used his great wealth to shield Vegas from the worst effects of the Great War and extend his own life to rebuild for the future. But unlike Eddie Winter, House is not a ghoul. Instead, he managed to survive for over 200 years by putting his body into a computerized life support stasis pod. You see, House is basically a VTuber. He speaks to us via an avatar on a computer monitor, but his actual body is withered beyond belief. To be honest, it's amazing that he even managed to survive in a pod. Of course, if you decide to ally with one of the other major factions in New Vegas, then you'll get to pull the plug on the so-called savior of New Vegas. Imagine that, bro. Surviving for over 2 centuries, including a nuclear war, only to get ganked by some disgruntled Amazon delivery driver. Number 3. Harold, Fallout 1, 2, and 3. Harold is a popular recurring character who we can meet over the course of the first 3 games. Harold was only 5 years old when the bombs went off in 2077, retreating into Vault 29, which was home to exclusively children from wealthy families. Harold will grow up in the vault for the next 13 years, but eventually got restless enough to leave and head to the surface. Over the next few years, he established himself as one of the premier caravan traders in the hub. But his life would be turned upside down when he joined an expedition to investigate a string of mutant attacks that was plaguing the caravans. This trip was organized by Richard Gray, who we'll meet later in this video, and it eventually led to Mariposa Military Base, which was ground zero for FEV experimentation. The Forced Evolutionary Virus, or FEV, transforms people into super mutants. and it was during this expedition that Harold would be exposed to FEV, permanently transforming him. But unlike other victims of FEV experimentation, Harold didn't turn into a super mutant, but rather became a unique mutant-ghoul hybrid owing to his prior radiation exposure on the surface. We will first meet Harold in the hub, specifically Old Town in Fallout 1, and despite the hardships he faced in his life, Harold maintains a cheery and humorous demeanor. Later in Fallout 2, Harold can be encountered as the mayor of Gecko, and Harold's journeys would eventually take him east to the Capital Wasteland, where we can meet him in the Oasis in Fallout 3. But things have taken a dark turn for Harold, as further mutations have caused a tree to sprout from his body. Now firmly rooted into the ground and worshipped by a group of lunatics, Harold will beg the Lone Wanderer for the sweet release of death. Number 4, the Cabot Family, Fallout 4. Meet some of the oldest, if not the oldest characters in the Fallout universe. Jack, Wilhelmina, Emma Jean, and Lorenzo Cabot. Most of the pre-war characters we meet in Fallout are ghouls, but the Cabot family are unique in that an ancient alien artifact is the source of their immortality. Lorenzo Cabot first discovered this artifact during an expedition to Arabia in the late 1800s, nearly 200 years before the Great War. Wearing the crown granted numerous physiological benefits to Lorenzo, including a halting to the aging process through transformation of his blood cells. But it also allegedly made him mentally unstable, and Lorenzo was committed to an insane asylum as his condition worsened. The rest of the Cabot family, Jack, Emma Jean, and Wilhelmina, all managed to survive by extracting samples of Lorenzo's blood to create a mysterious immortality serum that halted their aging as well. By the time we interact with the Cabots in Fallout 4, each family member are roughly 400 years old. The questline ends with either Lorenzo getting free and eliminating his family, or dying at the hands of the sole survivor and Jack Cabot. Definitely a wild ride, and one of my favorite questlines in Fallout 4. Number 5, Raul, Fallout New Vegas. Played by the great Danny Trejo, Raul, the laid-back ghoul mechanic, is a potential companion we can meet in the Nightkin base in Black Mountain. Born in Mexico 30 years before the Great War, Raul's family owned Hidalgo Ranch on the outskirts of Mexico City. In the aftermath of the nuclear devastation, a stream of refugees fled to the ranch. And while his family initially tried to help the refugees, these very same people eventually burnt down Raul's family house. His parents died in the blaze, and only Raul and his sister survived. Raul eventually became ghoulified since he was exploring the ruins of Mexico City with nothing to protect him from radiation exposure. He and his sister would survive as scavengers for years. But on one fateful day, his sister was murdered by raiders when she went out to look for supplies. Raul was consumed by rage and grief, vowing to hunt down and kill every last person responsible for his sister's death, a goal he would eventually achieve. We can explore even more aspects of Raul's backstory through our conversations with him in Fallout New Vegas, but the running theme is that this is a guy who's always been looking for peace. But outside circumstances pushed him time and again to turn to violence to survive. First the bombs, then the refugees, then the raiders. So while Raul may seem chill and calm on the surface, underneath he's carrying an incredible amount of guilt and pain because of the hardships he endured. Number 6, Desmond. We meet this character in the Point Lookout DLC of Fallout 3. Desmond is a pre-war ghoul who, much like Eddie Winter, chose the path of ghoulification to become immortal before the Great War even happened. Desmond was a high-ranking intelligence agent with a hard-headed personality. And before the war, he created a number of enemies and rivals, which sets up the plot of the Point Lookout expansion. The DLC begins with an attack on the Calvert Mansion by a gang of tribals. This group is being manipulated to target Desmond by another pre-war character, Professor Calvert, who lives on today as a brain in a jar. Calvert and Desmond's rivalry goes back to the pre-war days, when Desmond was involved in taking the Calvert family down with some political scandals. At the end of the DLC, you can decide whether to kill Desmond or Calvert. If you side with the brain in a jar, though, you'll have to kill them both because the brain betrays you afterward. Kind of a wild DLC, to be honest. Number 7, the residents of Sanctuary Hills, Fallout 4. While we only spend about 10 minutes in Sanctuary Hills before the bombs go off at the beginning of Fallout 4, there are a few characters we will meet again later in the game. The obvious ones are the sole survivor and Sean, who stayed alive by getting put in the freezer. But we can also bump into the Voltec salesman, who turned into a ghoul and ended up living in the hotel in Goodneighbor. If we want to be nice, we can invite the poor bloke to come live in Sanctuary Hills, where he will incessantly repeat the same dialogue line every time you come back into the town.
You know what? Since we talked, I'm feeling swell. Look at the two of us here in Sanctuary, prepared for the future.
But these are not the only characters from Sanctuary Hills we can meet. During a random encounter, we can stumble upon a pack of named feral ghouls, and the names of these characters match the ones we see outside of Vault 111 at the start of the game. So while we cannot speak to them because they've turned into flesh-eating zombies, they are technically still alive over 200 years later. Number 8, Roy Phillips, Fallout 3. Outside a Tenpenny Tower, we can stumble upon this ghoul who's bashing on the fence intercom like, "Let me in!" Roy was actually alive at the time of the Great War, living as a police officer. But now in the Capital Wasteland, he's leading a group of ghouls in one of the subway tunnels and cooking up a plan to take over Tenpenny Tower. We can either go along with his plan, convince the residents to let the ghouls in peacefully, or kill him for the security guard Gustavo. Number 9, The Master, Fallout 1. Richard Gray, aka The Master, emerges as the main villain of the first Fallout game. Leader of the Unity, Gray sought to transform humanity by using FEV so that they could thrive in the post-apocalyptic wasteland. He procured test subjects by conducting raids on caravans and towns, turning his victims into future soldiers of his super mutant army. But the Master was not always the monstrous amalgamation we meet in Fallout 1. He was actually born before the war, and his real name is Richard Morgan. When the bombs went off in 2077, Morgan was just a child, but he managed to survive by retreating into Vault 8. This was a control vault intended to repopulate the surface, and Vault 8's doors were opened in the early 2090s. The residents would go on to build Vault City, which is prominently featured in Fallout 2. But Richard Morgan didn't partake in this process because he was exiled for murder. He changed his name to Richard Gray and set out for the hub to create a new life, eventually befriending a man named Harold, who we talked about earlier in this video. Gray and Harold would lead an expedition to investigate the Mariposa military base, and in the process, Gray would get knocked into a vat of FEV, transforming him into a mutant. After recovering from exposure to the virus, Gray would embark on FEV experiments of his own, eventually leading to the construction of a super mutant army. But his plans were eventually foiled by the Vault Dweller at the end of Fallout 1. Number 10, John Caleb Bradberton, Fallout 4. The inventor of Nuka-Cola also managed to survive the war, but not by retreating into a vault or turning into a ghoul. Instead, he made a deal with the US military in exchange for immortality technology. But unfortunately, that technology amounted to putting his head in a jar and linking him up to a computer, where he would remain stationary for the next 200 years.
Come on, you're a disembodied head trapped in a vault. You've got so much to live for.
Despite your obvious sarcasm, you clearly recognize my situation for the living hell that it is.
In the Nuka World DLC, the sole survivor and Sierra Petrovita find him inside his office vault, and the player can either decide to honor his wishes and put him out of his misery, or let him live with Sierra. So there you have it. A bunch of Fallout characters we can meet who survived the Great War. It actually ended up being more than 10 on this list. And there are actually plenty of others that I couldn't fit into this video, like Dean Domino in the Dead Money DLC, Billy the Ghoul and his parents, the Robo Brains in the Far Harbor DLC, and a bunch of characters in Fallout 76. So who is your favorite pre-war Fallout character? Let me know in the comments below. If you liked this video, be sure to subscribe to Big Dan Gaming for more Fallout and RPG videos. Big shout out to all the channel members for supporting my content. Until next time, this has been Big Dan. I should go.